Effect of 2008 global financial crisis.
The impact of global financial crisis of 2008 ay maraming tao ang nag-suffer at maraming business ang nagsara because of this crisis. Marami din nag-file ng bankruptcy just like commercial banks and insurance companies. Milyon din sa mga tao ang nawalan ng trabaho. It's one of the downfall of every country in the world just like US, Iceland, England, France, and other countries. To further discuss the importance of analyzing this report, here is Beloved to discuss it.
The importance we study this financial crisis is to improve our understanding of credit market and financial institution as national and international level, as well as the work of an economy, its structure and response to the domestic and external shocks. So, some of us ay familiar na sa quote na those who cannot learn from the history are doomed to repeat it. Mahalaga na i-analyze natin yung mga failure at development na nangyari noong financial crisis 2008. So our future generation will know how to prevent it or minimize the effect. To explain the background, here is Joanna to discuss it.
The global financial crisis that happened between 2008 is considered as one of the worst since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Banks and lending institutions ay nag-offer ng low interest rates on mortgages at nag-encourage ng maraming homeowners to take out loans that they couldn't afford. And it resulted to housing market bubble, created by an overwhelming load of mortgage-backed securities that bundled high-risk loans. Banks that demanded more mortgages to support the profitable sale of these derivatives na nag-result kaya nagkaroon ng tinatawag na Great Recession. Maraming pamilya na walang tirahan, businesses or savings, maging ang mga workers ay nawalan ng trabaho. Dahil dito, maraming nag-suffer even the housing market. Yung pag-recover nila sa crisis was really slow for most Americans, even na tinulungan na sila ng government. By year 2010, some of them had fully recovered their losses. Unfortunately, some of them never did. For next reporter, here's Daisy to discuss key statistics.
For this part, it is not surprising na maraming bangko ang napuna dahil sa kanilang securities holding. This means na maraming investment bank and other with large securities trading ang naapektuhan. Ang first major firm na na-rescue ay ang Bear Stearns, but others already declared their losses. In this graph, bank perception of risk increased kaya nagsimula silang maghigpit pagdating sa lending. Dahil rin dito, maraming customers ang nagsimulang kunin ang kanilang pera out of the banks. Dahil iniisip nila na pwedeng madamay ang kanilang pera. The major industrial economies ng United States, Euro area, and Japan ay naka-experience ng economic contractions of the first half of 2018. For the next graph, here is Chloe Cruz to discuss it.
Dahil sa macroeconomic consequences, ang asset market ay lalong bumaba. Mas lalo pa itong bumaba dahil sa Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers has been important in many security and derivative market. Nagkaroon sila ng problema dahil sa subprime mortgages. At nag-cause ito ng risk aversions. Mas lalo pa itong lumala nang nagkaroon na ng concern ang mga tao dahil sa bank solvency. Mas nahirapan silang i-prevent ito. Here is Miss Eunice Pascual to discuss global economic prospect.
This crisis not only affects the U.S. economy but different economies around the world. We are internationally connected with one another, thus sharing the risk. During that time, Southeast Asian countries experienced declines in export demand, losses in investment, especially sa mga may major investors na kabilang doon sa apektadong bansa sa crisis. Bumaba rin ang bilang ng mga turista sa kanila. Dahil na rin syempre yung mga turista gusto magbakasyon sa bansa na currently walang crisis. Also, sa remittances. Many OFW that time loses their job dahil nga sa crisis. Tendency, wala silang choice kundi umuwi dito at dito maghanap ng trabaho. Pero despite sa mga negative na epekto nito sa Southeast Asia, mabilis pa rin silang nakapag-respond sa crisis na ito. Dahil na rin siguro sa 1997 crisis that they experienced before, natuto na sila sa kung paano magre-respond sa crisis para mabilis silang maka-cope up at maka-overcome. To further discuss what's the game plan and strategy that time, here's Chris.
During the 2008 global financial crisis, the Southeast Asian countries have strategies or game plan na ginagamit at ina-apply pa rin nila hanggang ngayon. strategies na yun nakatutulong din if ever na mangyari ulit yung financial crisis. First on their strategy is they enhance the investment rules and improve their customers' protection. This strategy is to protect their investors from any kinds of risk. Second, enhance the human capital and education standard to increase the employment rate and yung productivity ng employee, and also sa education standards para hindi mo pag-iwanan yung mga countries na naapektuhan ng crisis. Third, enhance the regional trade. This is to provide opportunities and para na rin tumaas yung demand sa mga ine-export na products. And to discuss about global economic prospect of other countries, here's Erica Santos.
Just like the financial crisis happened to Japan, nangyari din ito sa Ukraine way back 2008. Major factor of the crisis was related to the global risk aversion at dahil na rin sa overconfidence of the Ukraine government that they are immune by the spreading of this global financial crisis na nag-result sa various impacts on their economy at other industries that they have. Para makasurvive sila sa crisis na ito, they come up with the short-term strategies that may help somehow ease the situation. On facing the crisis, they have built immediate implementation of regulatory clearance to get rid of all obsolete and rudimentary laws and regulations damaging market competition and allowing for excessive state intervention. For the next reporter, here's Tyron de los Reyes to discuss the impact of global financial crisis on Japan.
Bago magsimula ang global financial crisis, the Japanese stock prices ay nag-reach ng recent peak nila noong summer of 2007 at unti-unting bumaba noong 2008 nang lumaganap ang US subprime loan. Their exports dropped a record of 16.4% for the year. Their three main categories of exports are industrial supplies, capital equipment, and consumer durables. Dahil sa pagbaba ng Japanese exports, nakaapekto ito sa industriya ng Japan at kawalan na rin ng trabaho ng ibang tao. Upang mabilis na makabangon ng Japan dahil sa external shocks, gumawa sila ng paraan upang ibalik ang kanilang export of finished goods to emerging Asia, which is the China, Indonesia, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, Taiwan, Thailand, and the Philippines. For the next reporter, here is Dian for theoretical framework.
Theoretical framework. Through Quick-Salyan cumulative process ay isang theory in monetary thinking. Ito ay nagpo-provide ng three market macro model, money, credit, and goods na capable mag-demonstrate on what happened. Central banks ay may interest rate na sobrang baba o sobrang taas. This process theory dahil sa excess reserves created by monetary increase. Yung bangko ay magre-reduce by which lend to lending money. This process we call cumulative because it continues as long as money rate is below the natural rate. For the next theory, here's Paulino to discuss Irving Fisher's debt deflation theory.
Fisher proposed the debt deflation theory of depression. His theory was straightforward dahil sa deflation disruption. Yung resulting impact ng lower price level will not appear to return production sa maximum employment value. So, ang pinupunto lang dito is yung deflation plays an important role sa balance sheet and net worth ng borrower. Furthermore, yung change in market and falling prices is nakakapag-trigger ng deflation, which is nakakapag-decrease ng demand further by negatively anticipated profitability. Full employment equilibrium cannot be restored as long as yung low price level is walang impact on a meaningful impact sa demand. So, for the next reporter, here's Ms. Maribeth to discuss the review and related literature.
The crisis did not have one cause. A myriad of events and causes interacted to create a perfect storm. It was a widespread crisis that different economists and researchers have different approaches in discussing what caused it and what are its current impact to our global economy. First cause is the global financial imbalances that was explored by Thakor in 2015. In his study, this disaster started when funds from rising economies like China flowed into the United States financial market in the manner towards seeking better returns. Disinvestments of these funds in the US market took place. Due to the massive inflow of funds, cost of bonds and financial derivatives increased. Next is the regulatory and monetary laxity. Espinilla proposed that the crisis could be perceived from two ideological extremes: regulatory failure in credit risk transfer market and monetary laxity. In his study, the contribution of regulatory factors, specifically in the credit risk transfer market, which catalyzed the emergence of the economic and financial crisis, should be considered as one cause of the crisis. The third cause, which is the most studied cause, it is the housing bubble. Real house prices in the United States were quite stable from the years 1890 to 1997, displaying an average annual increase of just 0.09 of 1 percentage point. However, that changed in the early 2000s between 1997 to 2006, where the index soared by 85% before crashing. Excessive leverage is another cause. In the research conducted by Del Arisha in 2008, it was explained that increases in leverage and declines in lending standards in turn often link asset prices and credit booms to subsequent financial crises. The global financial crisis indeed had an impact to different economies and how companies operated during that time. There was an increase in unemployment rate as companies needed to lay off workers in order to survive. This is linked in how the organization managed their employees. As Roche concluded that the human resource management of companies were affected by the crisis too. And lastly, the regulatory responses of different countries, most especially United States and Europe, proved that the crisis was a game changer.
For our conclusion, here's Miss Era Aguila to discuss it.
To sum up everything that has been discussed, yung crisis ay mabilis na nag-spread into global economic shock. The root was the subprime mortgage, which led economy to go into Great Recession. At ang primary cause nito ay ang securities ng financial regulation and its supervision. They failed to allocate its risk, kaya maraming bagay ang naapektuhan, katulad na lamang ng international financial system, housing market, at ang pag-rise ng unemployment. Maraming business ang nagsara at nag-file ng bankruptcy katulad na lamang ng Lehman Brothers. Many people lost their jobs, their homes, and a large amount of their wealth. Financial crisis is not predictable. The risks grow as long as you do not hit hard. To continue our discussion about our conclusion, here is Ms. Ruitas.
US government and Federal Reserve ay naghahanap ng paraan on how to balance a capital system at para na rin ma-rescue yung iba pang bangko noong September 2008. And they believe na banks are just pure greed and should not have been saved in that situation. If ever man, maraming firms ang bibili nitong properties na pwedeng ma-resolve sa healthier economy. To add more, here's Brian Buenaflor to explain it.
Lahat ng lessons from financial crisis ay hindi lang concern ng ekonomiya or economists sa mga policies ng ibang markets na nagbabangon sa global economy and financial system. Yung mga developing countries ang haharap sa burden of learning and kung paano i-apply yung mga bagay na natutunan from this situation. The behaviors of official will be an important role kung itong gantong crisis ay mauulit-uli. One of many lessons from the crisis is that great things must stop whether we disagree or not. If the very good days last, it is more likely that end is unbearable. For our recommendation, next reporter will be Julian Santa Ana.
I am Julian Santa Ana to discuss recommendation. So to start, the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 had a devastating effect globally. The root cause of the financial crisis is predatory lending and regulatory negligence. Ang maaaring solusyon sa krisis na ito ay ang pagtitibay at ang pag-stabilize ng financial system. Mahalaga ang pagkakaroon ng financial stability sa isang ekonomiya dahil sumasalamin ito sa isang mahusay na financial system. Habang pinagtitibay nito ang pagtitiwala sa sistema, pinipigilan nito ang mga maaaring problema na maaari ikapahamak ng isang ekonomiya. Ang fiscal policy ay ang paggamit ng government spending at taxation upang maimpluwensyahan ang isang ekonomiya. So to discuss some more information about fiscal policy recommendation, here's Krisa Cruz to discuss it.
May dalawang uri ng fiscal policy, ngunit we recommend using expansionary fiscal policy dahil ito ang pinakaakmang solusyon dahil kapag ang ekonomiya ay declining, expansionary fiscal policy promotes prosperity in times of recession. The government can pursue expansionary fiscal policy by lowering tax rate in order to stimulate aggregate demand and economic growth. Expansionary fiscal policy is implemented in order to boost the declining economy. To continue our discussion, here Claudine to add some recommendation related to our topic.
Another recommendation is to stabilize the economy with monetary stimulus. Since sobrang importante na mag-increase yung liquidity, makakatulong ito mag-create ng economic growth and also it reduces liquidity to prevent inflation. And our last recommendation is to stabilize the economy with fiscal stimulus. Mahalaga siyang tool para sa pamamahala ng ekonomiya and because of its ability to affect the total amount of output produced, that is gross domestic product.
Thank you.